Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Do us a favor, subscribe to that YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, upvote, comment, all of that stuff. We are here with Brian Smith, the resident expert on all things recruiting in the Locked On Network, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on inside the state of Mississippi. Normally you see him on Saturday mornings. We're going to change it up a little bit. He's going to be a Thursday gift for everybody this week. Just because our normal baseball guy who does our weekend preview, he's gone. So obviously Ole Miss did not make Hoover. But how you doing, Brian?
Doing well, sir. How about yourself?
Pretty good. We talked about Damon Williams and how he was waitlisted after the Oxford Elite 11. He did get the call to go to the Elite 11 finals. I think it's well deserving. I'm pretty fired up to see what he could do out there with Dylan Raiola and all those guys.
That's cool for him, man, because I've been out to the finals before, and it's one of those deals where a lot of the kids, especially like in the Deep South, going to L.A., competing against everybody, they'll have former Elite 11 winners there, guys that have been drafted, just walking around talking to them. That's a great experience. So it's going to help him grow on and off the gridiron. Last year I was just chatting it up with Bryce Young, just the random guy hanging out at a football field. At Elite 11 because he'd been at that before. So good for him. And I'm kind of curious to see how he does, especially with the accuracy challenge, because they have really unique ways to look at the distance, the order they throw. All of that can help us measure how good a kid is now, as well as what we can think of they're going to do long term. So good for him, and I'm curious to see what he does.
Yeah, and one of the players that he is recruiting heavily to Ole Miss is Caleb Odom. And for a while now, people have wondered, would he be the next commitment? And now I do realize that we're about to enter camp season, so there's probably going to be some in-state guys that are going to be the next commitment. But Caleb Odom has to be. I think he's high on that list, isn't he, Brian?
From what I've heard, Ole Miss and Miami are the most likely landing spots, but he's going to take visits. Miami will be one of them. I think we'll have clarity on him by no later than about the 15th of July. It could be even in the month of June. The key that I heard, for whatever it's worth, is Ole Miss is giving him a shot to flat out play receiver. Mm-hmm. He's 215 already. Great kid, by the way. He's one of the better interviews I've done this year. And man, does he have a wingspan. Think about the recent history. Name a school that's got more history in the last, say, 5 to 8 years with big receivers than Ole Miss going to the NFL. It's not a hard selling point if you're Lane Kiffin in the Ole Miss Rebels, I wouldn't think. And, he's from just outside of Atlanta. He's familiar with SEC territory. And Caleb, great kid. I think he would do well if he ended up with the Rebels. So I'd be kind of curious to see what Kiffin would do with him with all his play calling abilities.
Yeah, because Jonathan Mingo just went in the second round this year, and he's over 220 pounds. So you're absolutely correct. As far as big receivers, Ole Miss definitely has a type at that position. Really.
They do.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit now to the defensive line in the state of Mississippi. So we'll start with the Kameron Beavers commitment. And Ole Miss has committed him. They've committed Jeffrey Rush. That's two of what I call the big four in defensive linemen in the state of Mississippi. What do you think about Kameron Beavers, and what's your impression?
He's bigger than I thought. At least based on what the listing is. I always like to do what I just personally call the look at it yourself or the eye test, however you want to say it. And his get off on film is what you're looking for. It screams SEC West. That's probably the easiest way. If you can play D-line, especially interior D-line in the SEC West, Auburn, Ole Miss, LSU, etc., you're a dude. And I don't think there would be any problem for him playing for any school, Alabama, A&M, doesn't matter. And I think he could play early. Really strong, but his first step just screams athlete. Forget football. He's a kid to be good in track. He could be good in baseball, whatever he wanted to do. If they can get him and maybe even somebody like Beavers or somebody like that to go along with him, you're talking about changing your program. We all know that Lane is going to find a way to score. If you haven't figured that out yet, and no matter what school you root for, you're probably not very good at understanding the game of football. Lane Kiffin is as good a play caller as there is in college ball. They have to stop more guys. You need talent to do that on defense. And this kid can play for anybody, man. This matters too because it's an in-state kid. They've got to do better at getting the in-state kids to stay home. This is a key player.
Yeah, there's two observations that I have on Cameron Beavers. First of all, the coach, whoever it is at Bay Springs, has figured out if you slant him, there's no offensive lineman in the state that can block him.
They get it every play.
Yeah, every play they slant that guy one way or that, and there's no chance that he is being blocked. Yep. And the second thing is this is different than the 2019 class for Ole Miss, and that class is pretty legendary amongst Ole Miss fans because Nakobe Dean went to Georgia. Derek Hall went to Auburn. Brian Young went to Alabama. All these top defensive prospects, they just seem to leak out of state. This is a situation with Jeffrey Rush and Cameron Beavers of Ole Miss kind of putting a flag in the ground and saying, this isn't happening again. We know this is a special class, and we are going to do what we can to make this a successful class for us.
I think there's 2 points to what you just said, and you're 100% correct. If you're ever going to consistently compete at the very top echelon of college football, which means basically the SEC, you can't lose your in-state kids. Nor can you lose them to the guys that you're trying to beat that always have more talent than you. That's not going to end well. So could you imagine what Ole Miss defenses would have looked like with Nakobe Dean? I mean, he was unbelievable. He was from Mississippi, and he was the best linebacker in the country, and they couldn't keep him home. So if you look at it now, they've got these 4 D linemen. We all know who they are. If they could even get 3 of them, it changes your program completely. And then it'll also make it easier to get more linebackers. Like the next Nakobe Dean that comes out of Mississippi, and it probably won't be long, because for those of you that don't know, Mississippi per capita puts about as many guys in the NFL as any state in the United States of America.
And they already have Terry and Perkins coming.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt either.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like Perkins, I think is just athlete. I think he could play about 5 spots. What a freak that kid is. Mm-hmm. But that also helps you get the next corner, and it also helps you get the next free safety. People want to play with other dudes. So getting these kids not only to get in your class, but getting them early will help Kiffin and everybody on the Ole Miss staff and some of the other guys too.
You know, I'm going to put you on the spot here, but do you know about anything about Fat Clark from Winona? Linebacker?
I mean, I know the name, but yeah. I don't know him, like his recruitment or anything like that.
This is just an example of Mississippi, to where there's a low-level 3-star that is late to get into recruiting because Mississippi is not an over-recruited state. It's still there. So you can still surprise people. And he was a low-level 3-star, went up as in the top 10 at the Elite 11 because they do the all positions thing now. He made that. He's 235 pounds. He's built like a prototypical, like Alabama-style linebackers that you think of. And this kid just started out like it's just an afterthought, and he's going to blow up and eventually be a 4-star by the time this recruiting season ends.
I have a running joke with a few of my buddies in the recruiting industry about different states, what we can expect and all that. But the one state that we all agree on that we don't know diddly about is Mississippi. And it's because of what you just said. The state is just, from a land perspective, is massive. The kids, there's one kid in every town. It's the biggest pain in the butt in the country to recruit. Because like I live in Florida, you live in Florida. The coach is flying here into about 3 or 4 cities, and they can hit every high school they need to, by and large, really quick. There's no good way to recruit Mississippi. So a kid like that, you just have to go around to all the schools. There's no efficient way to do it. It's unfortunate for some of the guys that get overlooked, but that's why some kid can go to Ole Miss or Southern Miss and be a low-level 3-star, whatever. And then after 2 years, you're like, wow, we know this kid's only going to be here 3 years because he's a dude. But he played at a 1A high school in Mississippi. It's one of the most cool things about recruiting in the South, these small high schools that have kids like that, or even a decent-sized school, but it's not overly recruited. You never know, man. It's amazing the talent that Mississippi puts out.
Yeah, if let's say that 2019 went differently, and you did get Nakobe Dean, and you did get Derek Hall, and you did get Brian Young, the kids that Ole Miss got in that class, in that Mississippi class, got them to a Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, they might have won. They might have been in the playoff.
Yeah,
legitimately, it changes.
That's how close it was. Yeah.
The difference between Georgia and I'll use them as the obvious because they've won it the last 2 years. You can go to like Pro Football Focus and look up snap counts. Okay. When people say, well, what the hell difference does that make? Some of the guys that are getting drafted for Georgia aren't even playing 400 snaps in a season. And it's because the guy behind them is going to get drafted too. He would start for 98% of the schools in the country, but Kirby can just rotate the guys. You need as many as you can, especially on defense, because you're chasing the ball, to just rotate. That's it. It's not a rocket science adventure. When your guy's playing 450 snaps in the regular season and you go to the playoffs, look at what happened to TCU. A lot of their guys played too much. That did not end well for them. I think Georgia just scored again. Yeah, so, right. You know what I mean? Ole Miss has run into that on like if you look at them at the end of the year, sometimes they're out of gas. They need more guys like that, especially on D. So once they get into a shootout with Alabama, they've got one more pass rusher, one more DB, whatever it is, and hopefully all of the above to make that big play.
Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every dayers tune in on tomorrow on the show, and we're going to have Kara or Tom. I don't know which one, but they'll be on at certain points during the week. I think it'll be Tom tomorrow. But tune in for that. Thank you, Brian, very much for joining us today. And, man, I just like talking to you about all this, and I look forward to talking to you next week, man.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.